Modern masculinity is completely collapsing, and the worst part is men are getting buried along with it, slowly becoming irrelevant in rooms that used to be respected in. And you might wonder why, because they're being lied to on what real masculinity is, and they don't even notice. Lied to, not by politicians, not by their parents, but by the very gurus who promise them a way out of their everyday lives. For most men, the real fear isn't losing, it's realizing you're already lost and you allowed it to happen. The identities they're being offered are both broken, and these identities are showing up in two major forms. Two directions broken men go, two survival strategies, both of them are failing. And the first major broken identity that's leading to collapse is the man who's loud, obnoxious, and performative. Most people think this man was born this way, aggressive, confrontational, always trying to dominate and control others, but the truth is much more uncomfortable and much more tragic than that. He learned early that neglect wasn't accidental. Staying quiet made him disappear. But when he disrupted the room, people reacted. Being the bad guy wasn't rebellion. It was an armor he wore that kept him from fading back into the background. So he put on a mask that couldn't be overlooked. He watched who got attention, who people listened to, and it wasn't the quiet one. It was the men who took space without permission. It was the men who made people uncomfortable just to be felt, and he mistook that for power. So he learned the lessons the world kept teaching him. If you don't impose yourself, you'll be forgotten. He started reading the world the way a wounded animal reads a cage. Everyone is either prey or a threat, and if you're not one, you become the other one. He stopped trusting his own weight a long time ago. From that point on, everything became a performance. Every disagreement became a contest. Every man became a competition. Backing down stopped being an option because backing down felt like humiliation, like going back to the boy no one noticed. He started measuring himself constantly against other men. Money, women, status, not to grow, but to tell himself he wasn't the weak one anymore. None of this was about dominance. Beneath performance, he wanted to be chosen, trusted, wanted, without having to perform for it. And aggression gives it to him. Briefly, just enough to keep him locked in the loop. But here's what no one tells him. The people around him can already smell the performance. They just don't say it to his face. Because men like that don't receive honest feedback. But underneath the performance is fear. Fear that without the mask, he would be exposed and hurt all over again. Reduced to the boy he swore he'd never be again. Women might notice him, but never feel safe around him. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's unstable. He may get compliance for a period, but her heart never settles. And without that safety, she'll never truly be loyal to him. Other men might orbit him, but they don't follow him. They're cautious, not loyal. And most of them are ready to turn the moment it benefits them. Others stick around because he's useful, just something to be extracted until there's nothing left to take. No one is truly invested in him. No one is committed to his rise. And late at night, when no one's watching, he knows the truth. He misses what it felt like before the mask. The warmth, the ease. He misses being able to relax without guarding his image. He wants real connection, but doesn't believe it's possible without losing its power. So he tells himself he's winning. The louder he gets, the more obvious it becomes. He isn't strong, he's performing strength, because he never learned how to be anything else. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not every man responds to pain by becoming a brute. Some respond by shrinking themselves.
I love you, but I actually love you and want to all of you.
The second collapse is much quieter. The damage runs deep and beneath the surface. This man didn't become small by accident. He learned a very different lesson than the loud alpha type. Not that force gets you attention, but that standing up for yourself comes with consequences. So he quieted himself and stayed in line. He didn't trust himself. When someone dismissed his opinion, he told himself it probably wasn't worth much anyway. He watched other men say less than him and get way more attention, more respect. Around men like that, he felt smaller. Around women he wanted, he put himself beneath them. Careful, accommodating, grateful for scraps of attention. He softened his voice, second-guessed his reactions, smiled when he felt disrespected. Over time, that fake posture became his real identity. He stopped believing he could be one of the men people lean towards. He stopped imagining himself as someone worth choosing. So he starts telling himself a story that allows him to cope. That loud men are insecure. That assertive men are compensating. That masculinity itself is primitive and outdated. He tells himself he's above it all, but the truth is much harsher. He isn't above masculinity, he's afraid of it. And worse, he's jealous of the men who can express it openly. While they're allowed to take a space, he's the one who has to wait. He just sits there telling himself that his time will come. What he refuses to express outwardly doesn't disappear, just accumulates. The anger doesn't go away, the resentment doesn't soften, the desire doesn't die. He becomes passive on the surface, but volatile underneath. He keeps score, he remembers every slight, every rejection. The loud man explodes outward. You see it coming, but this man implodes. And one day, the pressure has to go somewhere. Either he finally speaks out, or he lashes out. Not loudly, but suddenly and coldly, even with the cruelty that surprises everyone who thought he was just harmless. His tragedy isn't that he lacks power, it's that he never learned how to carry it properly. Women don't leave him because he's kind. They leave because they never felt like he was fully there. Like they were loving a man who was always slightly behind glass. Men don't dislike him. They just don't remember him. He comes, he goes, he makes no dent. He's not hated, he's forgotten. And to a man who spent his whole life trying not to be seen, that should feel like a win. But deep down, it never does. Both identities are survival strategies. Neither one is strength. Both fail for the same reason. Neither man owns his reactions. They let the world decide who they are. Both of them are playing a losing game, just in opposite directions. Neither of them realize we're entering a new era of masculinity. One where volatile and weak men get exposed, whereas composed men rise to the top effortlessly. What separates the composed man isn't that he lacks passion or fire, it's that the passion and fire answers to him, not to someone else provoking him. Since he knows himself on a deep level, nothing outside him gets to steer him. There is fire in him, desire, ambition, anger, drive. This isn't a man who's peaceful or grounded from having nothing left to fight for. This is a man who's been to war with himself and won the fight. The fire didn't go out, it went deeper, and he decides when it surfaces. That's what matters. That's what makes the difference. That's what separates him from the two collapsed archetypes. He doesn't need to dominate conversations. He doesn't argue to be right. He doesn't chase respect. He sets conditions and he lets others decide if they can meet them. This is why people experience him differently. Women feel safe around him, not because he's harmless, but because he's powerful. She doesn't feel overly managed by him. She feels like her needs are met. That distinction is the difference between a woman who respects you and one who's just tolerating you. They feel his strength without it pressing on them. They know his boundaries without being trapped by them. They trust him, and that trust deepens attraction over time. The truly composed man doesn't seek approval. He calibrates himself. His words, his standards, his direction, always refining himself. This is why chaos loses power around him. Not because he suppresses it, but because he isn't governed by it. That's real command of his reality. This isn't a response to what's breaking down. It's an announcement of what's coming. Composed masculinity doesn't fight for relevance. It just shows up, and everything else adjusts around it. This isn't a personality type, it's a standard, and most men have never been taught how to reach it. Masculinity didn't disappear, it got exposed. The men who rely on noise burn themselves out. The men who rely on approval slowly vanish. And what remains are the men who can govern themselves when others can't. This isn't about being dominant or agreeable or impressive. It's about whether you're reactive or centered. The future doesn't belong to the loudest man in the room. It belongs to the one who doesn't need the room at all. The problem is, in today's generation, performative masculinity is showing up in many more men than you think. If you want the exact blueprint on how to best prevent becoming a sideshow, watch my last video. It lays out the pillars these men are missing and the exact foundation that prevents this collapse in the first place.